Most people over 50 are told the same story about cancer risk. It's genetics, it's bad luck, it's something hidden in the family tree that eventually appears one day without warning. But that's only part of the picture. Because for many people, risk doesn't arrive suddenly. It builds quietly, year after year, through changes happening inside the body every single day. Small shifts in inflammation, slower circulation, less efficient immune defense, reduced repair capacity at the cellular level. And one of the most overlooked pieces of that puzzle involves your stem cells. These are some of the body's natural renewal cells, the cells that help repair tissue, maintain balance, and support recovery. They don't simply disappear after 50. In many cases, they're still there, but they may become less active, less responsive, and less able to do their job. Think of your body like a city. The repair crews still exist. The tools are still available, but the signals telling them where to go, when to respond, and how urgently to work start fading. That's when damage can accumulate faster than repair. What's fascinating is that one surprisingly simple daily behavior may help switch several of these protective systems back on at once. And once you understand what this one daily behavior changes inside your body, everything about prevention starts to look different. If you're over 50, you may have noticed changes that seem small on their own, but together they tell a story many people miss. Maybe your stamina isn't what it was a few years ago. Tasks that once felt easy now take more out of you. You wake up feeling stiff, especially in the hips, knees, or lower back. After doing yard work, walking longer than usual, or carrying groceries, recovery takes longer than it used to. You may notice a little weight gain, even though your eating habits haven't changed much. Not dramatic weight gain, just enough to feel like your body responds differently now. Some people describe it as brain fog. Others say they feel less sharp, slower to recall names, less mentally energized by the afternoon. Sleep may become lighter. You sleep the same number of hours, but wake feeling less restored. And motivation for movement can quietly drop too. Not because you're lazy, because when movement feels harder, the brain naturally starts avoiding it. Many adults are still functioning well. They go to work, they take care of family, they handle responsibilities. On the outside, life looks normal, but internally, something feels slower. You may sit down more often than before, feel drained after errands that once felt routine. Avoid stairs unless necessary. Notice that a minor cold lingers longer. Feel older than you expected to feel at this stage of life. Most people are told this is simply aging, but often these changes are connected to deeper shifts. Reduced metabolic flexibility, slower circulation, chronic low-grade inflammation, less efficient energy production, and weaker cellular renewal systems. In other words, these are not random inconveniences. They can be signals that the systems responsible for repair and resilience are no longer working as efficiently as they once did. So if these subtle signs are common, what's actually changing underneath the surface? Hi, I am Dr. Christal. Over the years, I've worked with many adults in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, and one pattern shows up again and again. Two people can be the exact same age on paper and look completely different biologically. One person is active, mentally sharp, steady on their feet, sleeping reasonably well, and recovering quickly when life throws stress at them. The other may be dealing with fatigue, rising blood sugar, stubborn weight gain, joint discomfort, inflammation, and a growing list of risk factors. Same age, very different internal reality. What I've learned is that the difference usually isn't some secret advantage. It's rarely extreme diets, rarely expensive supplements, rarely perfect genes. More often, it's the accumulation of ordinary daily habits repeated over years. I've seen patients who began with very modest changes, nothing dramatic. They simply started moving their bodies consistently each day. Not punishing workouts, not athletic training, just regular movement they could sustain. Over time, their energy improved. Blood sugar became more stable. Inflammation markers often moved in the right direction. Mood lifted, sleep improved. They felt more capable, more resilient, more like themselves again. I've also seen the opposite pattern. People waiting for one major fix while spending most of the day sedentary. Waiting for the perfect plan, the perfect supplement, the perfect moment to start. And while they waited, the body kept adapting to inactivity. I say this with compassion because many people were never taught how prevention really works. They were taught to react after problems appear. But the body is listening long before symptoms become obvious. It responds to repeated signals, day after day, week after week, and those signals can either support decline or support repair. The body responds to what we repeatedly do, and that may be more powerful than most people realize. So, what does a simple daily habit have to do with stem cells and cancer risk? Quite a lot, once you understand how the body actually works. Most people focus on symptoms and diagnoses because that's what they can feel or what shows up on a test. Fatigue, weight gain, high blood sugar, inflammation, disease risk, but these are often downstream effects. Upstream are the systems quietly shaping your health every day. The systems that control repair, regulate inflammation, detect abnormal cells, produce energy, manage growth signals, and maintain healthy tissue. When those systems are working well, the body is far more resilient. When they begin drifting in the wrong direction, risk can slowly rise long before anything dramatic appears. And after 50, that drift becomes more common, not because the body is suddenly broken, but because it often receives fewer of the signals that keep those systems sharp and responsive. Less stimulation, less demand, less adaptation. The body starts conserving instead of renewing. What makes this so important is that one consistent daily behavior can positively influence many of these protective systems at the same time. It can support mitochondrial function, improve insulin sensitivity, enhance immune surveillance, increase circulation, help regulate inflammation, and create a healthier environment for stem cells to function. That's why this habit is so much more powerful than it appears from the outside. Because what looks simple on the surface may be sending life-changing instructions underneath it. And to understand why, we need to look at what's happening inside the body when that signal is missing, and what changes when it returns. Let's build the foundation clearly, because once you understand this, many things start to make sense. Stem cells are often described as the body's reserve repair cells. They help maintain tissues, replace worn out or damaged cells, and support recovery after stress, injury, or normal daily wear and tear. And they exist in different areas of the body, such as bone marrow, muscle, skin, and other tissues, and their job is not to constantly overreact. Their job is to respond when needed, help renew tissue, and preserve function over time. But stem cells do not work in isolation. They depend heavily on the environment around them. Think of stem cells like highly skilled repair workers. Even the best workers need the right conditions to do quality work. They need energy to power the job. Clear instructions about where repair is needed, safe working conditions so they are not overwhelmed by chaos, and access to the damaged area so they can actually reach what needs attention. Inside the body, those conditions are shaped by several factors. Blood flow matters because it delivers oxygen and nutrients while carrying away waste products. Nutrient availability matters because repair requires raw materials. Hormonal balance matters because hormones help regulate growth, metabolism, and timing signals. Inflammation levels matter because short-term inflammation can help healing, but chronic inflammation can interfere with normal repair. Mitochondrial energy production matters because cells need usable energy to function efficiently. Immune signaling matters because the immune system helps monitor tissues, remove damaged cells, and coordinate recovery. Now, aging by itself does not automatically shut these systems down. What often changes them more dramatically is lifestyle pressure over time. Long periods of inactivity, poor sleep, excess body fat, insulin resistance, chronic psychological stress, and low daily movement. These factors can create what I call a noisy internal environment. Signals become less clear, energy becomes less efficient, inflammation stays elevated, blood sugar regulation worsens, recovery slows. In that setting, repair can still happen, but often less efficiently. And this is where cancer risk enters the conversation carefully and realistically. The body is constantly dealing with small amounts of cellular damage. That is normal. Healthy systems usually detect problems, repair what can be repaired, and remove cells that should not continue growing. But when repair systems weaken and abnormal growth signals rise, the body may become less effective at correcting damage or clearing problematic cells early. This is not about fear. It is about understanding that internal conditions matter. The terrain inside the body influences how well protection, repair, and resilience can operate every single day. Now let's connect the biology in a simple, practical way, because this is where things become very powerful. One of the most consistent findings in human biology is that a single daily habit like brisk walking can influence multiple protective systems at the same time. The first mechanism is reduced inflammation. When the body is inactive for long periods, inflammatory signals tend to build up in the background. This doesn't always cause immediate pain, but it creates a constant low-level stress on tissues. Daily movement helps lower these chronic inflammatory signals, and when inflammation decreases, there is less collateral stress on cells and fewer conditions that can damage DNA over time. The second mechanism involves insulin and IGF-1 regulation. When muscles are used regularly, they become more efficient at absorbing glucose from the bloodstream. This improves insulin sensitivity. In simple terms, the body no longer needs to produce as much insulin to manage blood sugar. This helps stabilize energy levels and may reduce excessive growth, signaling that, when chronically elevated, is associated with metabolic disease and environments that are less protective at the cellular level. The third mechanism is stronger mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the energy producers inside your cells. Regular movement signals them to become more efficient and more numerous over time. Better mitochondria mean better energy production, and that directly supports repair processes, stem cell activity, and overall resilience. The fourth mechanism is improved immune surveillance. Movement improves circulation, which allows immune cells to travel more effectively throughout the body. This enhances the immune system's ability to monitor tissues, identify abnormalities, and respond early when something is not functioning correctly. When you step back, these mechanisms are not isolated, they work together. And in real life, this shows up in very tangible ways. People often notice more stable energy throughout the day, less fatigue after simple tasks, easier weight control without extreme dieting, clearer thinking and improved focus, and a general sense that aging feels less like a decline and more like a gradual, manageable process. That combination is what makes this simple habit biologically powerful. It supports multiple systems at once, rather than targeting just one. Now here's where it becomes even more important to understand how the body actually behaves over time. Health isn't just a list of separate factors. It's a network of feedback loops, systems that reinforce each other in both positive and negative directions. Let's start with the downward spiral many people don't notice at first. A more sedentary lifestyle reduces how often muscles are activated. When that happens, the body becomes less efficient at managing glucose. Blood sugar regulation starts to weaken, and insulin levels may run higher than they should for longer periods. Over time, this can contribute to gradual fat gain, especially around the abdomen. That increase in fat tissue is not just storage. It actively produces inflammatory signals. So now you have more inflammation circulating in the background. That inflammation affects energy levels. You feel more tired, more sluggish, less motivated to move. And when you move less, the cycle continues. Less movement leads to poorer circulation. Poor circulation means tissues receive less oxygen and fewer nutrients. That slows recovery after daily activity. Stiffness increases, discomfort becomes more noticeable, and once again, movement feels even less appealing. Now add stress and poor sleep into the mix. Stress hormones can disrupt appetite regulation and sleep quality. Poor sleep then worsens metabolic control, increases cravings, and further reduces energy. So the cycle deepens from multiple directions at once. But the most important realization is that this system works both ways, because the reverse cycle is just as real, and often begins with something surprisingly simple. A 30-minute daily walk can immediately improve glucose control. Muscles actively pull sugar from the bloodstream, reducing metabolic strain. That alone can begin to stabilize energy levels. With more stable energy, movement feels easier. You are more likely to stay active during the day. And that additional activity helps reduce inflammation over time. As inflammation decreases, mood often improves, sleep quality can improve, motivation increases, and suddenly, consistency becomes less of a struggle and more of a natural rhythm. This is the key insight. Small daily actions don't just produce small effects. They can gradually shift entire biological systems by changing the direction of these feedback loops. And once the loop turns in the right direction, the body begins to support you instead of working against you. When we zoom out, the impact of daily movement goes far beyond any single system in the body. It's not just about one benefit. It's about how multiple systems start working in coordination again. Take the brain, for example. The brain is highly dependent on blood flow and metabolic stability. When you walk daily, circulation improves, which increases oxygen delivery and supports the transport of nutrients that the brain needs to function. At the same time, movement stimulates the release of neurochemicals that support focus, mental clarity, and cognitive flexibility. Many people don't realize that clearer thinking and better memory are often downstream effects of better physical activity, not just mental exercises. Mood is another major area. Regular movement helps regulate stress hormones and supports the release of endorphins and other mood-stabilizing chemicals. This doesn't mean exercise removes stress from life. It means the body becomes more resilient to it. Emotional recovery becomes faster, and mental fatigue doesn't linger as long. Then there's muscle and bone health. Daily movement provides the mechanical signals that tell your body to preserve strength and structure. Without those signals, muscle mass gradually declines and bones lose density over time. With them, the body receives a clear message: maintain function, stay strong, remain stable. Metabolically, regular activity improves flexibility, meaning the body becomes better at switching between burning glucose and fat for energy. That flexibility is a key marker of metabolic health and long-term stability. This also connects to frailty risk. People who remain consistently active tend to preserve balance, strength, and recovery capacity for longer, which directly impacts independence and quality of life as they age. Sleep is influenced as well. Movement helps regulate circadian rhythms, making it easier to fall asleep and stay in deeper, more restorative sleep stages. When you combine all of this, a bigger picture emerges. This is not just about reducing risk in one narrow sense. It's about preserving function across the entire system, physical, mental, and metabolic. And underneath all of it, you're also supporting the environment where stem cells operate. Because when circulation improves, inflammation decreases, energy production strengthens, and metabolic signals stabilize, you are not just protecting against decline. You are actively maintaining the conditions that allow repair systems to function properly. So this becomes less about disease prevention alone and more about preserving vitality, independence, and resilience for as long as possible. Now, it's important to understand something many people never hear clearly. It's not just the absence of movement that matters, but also the daily conditions that can quietly accelerate decline. And none of this is about blame. In fact, most of these patterns come directly from modern life being designed for convenience, not biology. One of the biggest accelerators is simply sitting most of the day. When the body stays inactive for long periods, muscle activity drops, circulation slows, and metabolic signaling becomes less efficient. Over time, this creates a biological environment that is less supportive of repair and energy production. Then there's diet quality. Highly processed foods can be calorie-dense but nutrient-poor. This means the body gets energy, but not always the full range of nutrients needed for optimal cellular function. Over time, this can contribute to metabolic strain and increased inflammation. Excess alcohol also plays a role by affecting sleep quality, liver metabolism, and inflammatory balance. Even moderate long-term patterns can subtly influence recovery systems. Chronic stress is another major factor. When stress becomes ongoing, cortisol remains elevated more often than it should. This can interfere with sleep, appetite regulation, immune balance, and even tissue repair processes. Poor sleep then compounds everything. Without deep, restorative sleep, the body has fewer opportunities to reset metabolic and immune systems. Abdominal weight gain is particularly important because fat tissue in that area is more metabolically active. It can release inflammatory signals that influence the entire system, including insulin sensitivity and circulation. And finally, there's isolation and low motivation for activity. When people feel disconnected or mentally fatigued, movement tends to decrease, which feeds directly into the feedback loops we discussed earlier. The key point is that none of these factors act alone. They stack together. But again, this is not about blame. These are common outcomes of modern environments: convenient food, sedentary jobs, digital lifestyles, and high-stress demands. The important realization is this: if these factors can collectively push the body toward decline, then even small positive shifts in the opposite direction can begin to reverse that trend. Because biology responds to patterns, not perfection. At this point, the key question becomes what actually helps shift all of these systems in a real, practical way. And the foundation is surprisingly simple. The primary habit is a 30-minute brisk walk each day. This doesn't need to be intense, it doesn't need special equipment, and it doesn't need to feel like a workout in the traditional sense. What matters most is consistency and daily signaling to the body that it should stay active, responsive, and metabolically engaged. For many people, this 30 minutes can be split in ways that feel more realistic. You might do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, and 10 minutes in the evening. Or take a short walk after meals, which is especially helpful for glucose control. Even these smaller sessions still send the same biological message. The body is being used regularly, and therefore it should maintain its systems. On top of this core habit, there are a few supportive behaviors that strengthen the effect. Strength training 2 times per week helps preserve muscle mass and bone density, which becomes increasingly important with age. It also improves insulin sensitivity and supports metabolic health. A Mediterranean-style eating pattern can provide a steady supply of nutrients that support inflammation control, cardiovascular health, and cellular function. A consistent sleep routine helps stabilize hormonal rhythms, allowing proper recovery and repair processes to occur overnight. Hydration supports circulation, energy production, and cellular efficiency. And stress management plays a quiet but powerful role in keeping inflammatory and hormonal systems balanced. But here's the most important principle to understand. Consistency matters more than intensity. A moderate habit done every day has far more biological impact than an intense effort done occasionally and then abandoned. The body responds to repeated signals over time, not short bursts of perfection. When these signals become part of daily life, they gradually reshape how the body functions at a deep level. And that's where real change begins. Before we finish, it's important to address a few common mistakes that often prevent people from seeing real results. Not because they lack effort, but because the approach itself is slightly off. One of the biggest mistakes is waiting for motivation. Motivation feels like it should come first, but in reality, it usually comes after action, not before it. Many people wait until they feel ready. And in the meantime, the body continues following the same low-activity patterns day after day. Another common pattern is doing exercise very intensely once or twice a week, but staying mostly inactive the rest of the time. The body doesn't respond strongly to isolated bursts. It responds to repeated daily signals. So even if someone works very hard on the weekend, long periods of inactivity during the week can still dominate the overall biological response. There is also the belief that walking is too simple to matter. This is one of the most misleading ideas. The body doesn't measure complexity, it measures consistency and frequency of movement. Something as simple as walking, when done daily, creates far more stable physiological benefits than occasional high-effort activity. Another issue is quitting after a missed week or disrupted routine. Life will always have interruptions. Illness, travel, stress, or schedule changes are normal. But progress is not defined by perfection. It is defined by how quickly you return to the routine afterward. A missed week does not erase progress unless it becomes a permanent stop. Finally, there is the tendency to focus on supplements or complex solutions before mastering the basics. Supplements can play a supportive role, but they cannot replace movement, sleep, nutrition, and stress balance. Without the foundation, they rarely create meaningful long-term change. The common thread in all of these mistakes is the search for something extreme or perfect, but biology doesn't require perfection. It requires repeatable routines that send the same healthy signals to the body every day. When you shift from intensity-based thinking to consistency-based living, everything becomes more sustainable, and the results become far more predictable. Now let's look at what realistic progress actually feels like when this kind of daily habit is applied consistently. In the first 1 to 2 weeks, most changes are subtle, but noticeable. People often report a slight improvement in mood. There's a sense of being a bit lighter mentally, even if life hasn't changed. Energy may feel a little more stable throughout the day instead of dipping sharply in the afternoon. Sleep can begin to improve, becoming slightly deeper or easier to fall into. Some people also notice digestion feels more regular and less sluggish. Then, between weeks 3 to 6, the changes become more tangible. Stamina starts to improve in everyday tasks. Walking upstairs feels a little easier. Long periods of sitting don't feel as stiff when you stand up. blood sugar control becomes more stable, which often translates into fewer energy crashes. The body starts to feel less tight, and morning stiffness may gradually reduce. As you move into months 2 to 6, the shifts become more structural. Changes in body composition may begin to appear, even without strict dieting. Metabolic markers like glucose regulation and lipid balance often show improvement in people who are consistent. There is also a noticeable increase in resilience, meaning the body recovers faster from stress, illness, or physical effort. Over the long term, the most important change is not just how you feel day to day, but the trajectory itself. Instead of gradually drifting toward decline, the body begins shifting toward stability. The overall risk profile for chronic disease trends lower, not because one single factor changed overnight, but because multiple systems were supported consistently over time. And that's the key point. These changes are not dramatic at first, but they are cumulative. And biology always responds to accumulation. One of the most important truths in all of this is something many people are never clearly told. Decline is not an automatic destiny. The body is constantly responding to signals. Every day, it is adjusting based on what you do repeatedly, how you move, how you eat, how you sleep, how you handle stress. And that responsiveness does not disappear with age. Even in your 60s, 70s, or beyond, the body still has a remarkable capacity to adapt. Blood vessels can become more efficient. Muscles can regain strength. Metabolic systems can become more stable. Inflammation can shift in a healthier direction. Energy production can improve. It may not happen overnight, and it may not look identical to younger years, but meaningful improvement is absolutely possible. What matters most is not intensity or perfection. It is repetition. In upcoming videos, we'll explore topics like the morning habit that can improve mitochondrial function after 50, how sleep timing affects cellular repair, and other simple biological switches that can quietly reshape how you age from the inside out. Because once you understand how these systems connect, you start to realize something important. Small daily habits aren't small at all.